and welcome to Narayana IAS. My name is Abhijit, and as a part of Daily News Analysis, we will be discussing 5 most important articles from The Hindu and Indian Express. So let's have a quick view over the topics that we are going to discuss today. First article is from page number 6, The Hindu Delhi edition, which talks about freshwater quest. This article is urging to search for new sources of fresh water, and one of the most important source of fresh water is under the marine water itself. This article is apprehending that in case of absence of clarity over the international acts and treaties, or in case of any discrepancy over the international acts, may cause future water wars. Second article is from page number 12, Indian Express, which talks about flip-flop-flip. This article is saying or explaining how abrupt change in agricultural policies is harming not just farmers but all the entities associated with agricultural exports. Next article is from page number 6, The Hindu, Folds and Fault. This article is discussing about a new AI tool that is AlphaFold 3 developed by Google. And this AlphaFold 3 will be helpful in understanding the protein structure, the folding of protein, and how this folding of protein can be helpful in understanding the diseases. What is folding of protein and how it is helpful in understanding the diseases we'll be discussing. Next article is from page number 16, Indian Express, which talks about Form 17C. Recently, a PIL has been filed before the Supreme Court of India, giving direction to Election Commission of India to public the data from Form 17C. So what is Form 17C and how this data of Form 17C will be helpful in our democratic politics we'll be discussing. Next article is from page number 8, The Hindu, which talks about Inter-Service Organization Act, and this act is giving more power to commanders over the armed force personnel to maintain the discipline. So what is this Inter-Service Organization Act and what are the implications we will be discussing. After all these discussions, we will be solving prelims and mains related questions. So let's start our discussion. So the first article for today's discussion is Freshwater Quest, the likely new gold hunt. As we know from a Sanskrit slok, Prithivyam Tridi Ratnani Jalam Annam Subhashitam Mudai Pashana Khandeshu Ratna Sangya Vidhiyate. There are 3 important and precious resources available on this earth. One is water, second is food, third is good speech. And water is one among them. But because of increase in population, because of increase in economic activity, this fresh sources of fresh water is getting depleted. And now we are in the search of new sources of fresh water. In pursuance of that, scientists, geologists have discovered undersea water sources. And now nations are extracting or going to extract such type of resources, such type of sources of fresh water. But in the present scenario, there's a lack of clarity over the international treaties. There is a discrepancy over the international laws and treaties, and that may create future water wars. Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about a very important international fora, that is UN clause. This article is discussing about area and other maritime zones to which this UN clause is defining and controlling. This other maritime zones includes EEZ, that is exclusive economic zone. This article is discussing about fresh water resources, especially underwater fresh water source or fresh water. If we map, we can map under GS paper 1, distribution of key natural resources across the world. Here we are discussing about a very important natural resource, that is water. In GS paper 2, important international institution, that is UN clause, and agencies and fora, their structure and mandate. previously UPSC has asked questions related with the water management or water harvesting system, water resources, etc. For example, in 2018, they asked about the water harvesting system. So you can expect such type of question in future as well. What is the context? Context is that there is a gap in the laws of sea, especially in exploratory activities that concern fresh water extraction. That means there is a source or huge source of fresh water under the sea, right? What is that? We'll be looking in a couple of minutes, but that is the fact, right? But there is a gap in the laws to explore these resources, and this gap in the laws is giving India an opportunity to lead in shaping non-controversial legislative text to address such issues, right? Why these things are creating an issue? Let's give it in context. Back in 1995, the former World Bank Vice President said, if the wars of this century were fought over oil, the wars of the next century will be fought over water, unless we change our approach to managing this precious and vital resource. And one of that resource is underwater or undersea water, fresh water source, right? So what are the sources or what are the examples? In 1960s, the US Geological Survey drilled boreholes off the coast of New Jersey and unexpectedly found fresh water. Scientists from Vietnam and other countries have also discovered underwater sources of fresh water. A significant discovery was made at the bottom of Black Sea, where river under the sea was found, and this was a very significant discovery, right? But why this fresh water source discovery is important? Because we lack in terms of water, in terms of fresh water or fresh water sources. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So there's an almost 96.5% water is in ocean. These water are not fresh water source and these are not directly usable, right? There are also almost 0.9% of water which is other saline water. Only 2.5% of total water on this earth is fresh water, and that can be directly used, right? Under this fresh water source, 68.7% of water is in the form of glaciers and ice cap, 30% water is groundwater, and 1.2% is water that is at the surface or other freshwater source, right? And even within this surface or other freshwater source, ground ice and permafrost is 69%, lakes is almost 20.9 or 21%, then soil moisture, swamp and marshes, river, living things and atmosphere are having its distribution or having its share in this water sources, right? That is why it is growing concern, interest in underwater fresh water. Why? Because we are limited in terms of water sources, fresh water sources, and that too is depleting, right? So as fresh water becomes a scarce resources, countries are expected to explore and possibly exploit fresh water reserves within and beyond their maritime zone. So what is maritime zone? We'll be looking in a couple of minutes, but beyond their maritime zone, they are looking for the freshwater resources, especially beneath the ocean bed. Countries will first explore and potentially exploit freshwater resources located within their maritime zones directly under the ocean bed. As freshwater sources within national jurisdiction become limited, countries are anticipated to extend their exploration activities beyond their exclusive economic zone. So there are two aspects of this part. First is what is exclusive economic zone, and if at all countries are moving beyond their maritime zone, why this is impacting the international rule and order, right? So first see the definition of this areas. First is territorial sea. This territorial sea is 12 nautical miles from the base sea line, right? Then it comes to contiguous zone, and within this contiguous zone, there is a limited enforcement or limited power of the countries, but they have power over the exploration of the natural resources. So that is the contiguous zone, that is 12 nautical mile from this territorial sea area, right? And then it comes to exclusive economic zone. In this exclusive economic zones, countries are having sovereign rights for exploring, exploiting, conserving and managing living and non-living resources of the water column and underlying continental shelf, but they don't have sovereignty that is extended to airspace, water column, seabed and subsoil, allowing the right of innocent passage. So this right is only available on territorial right, but exploration right is available on this or in this exclusive economic zone, beyond which they don't have sovereign rights, right? This area is being controlled under the help of UN clause system, right? So this area that is known as area, this exploration will advance into area as defined by Part 9 of the UN clause, that is United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea of 1982. The area encompasses the seabed, ocean floor and subsoil beyond the limits of national jurisdiction, that is final boundary of EEZ. Right? The area is designated under UN clause as the common heritage of mankind, that is a global common, and their status implies that resources found there are available for collective use and benefit with a focus on the welfare of future generations, right? But why this is creating controversy? Firstly, UN clause is there. UN clause, that is United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea, is the primary comprehensive international agreement that governs the oceans and includes most internationally accepted laws on maritime issues. But this UN clause is also accepting customary laws. So there is a role of customary international laws, and despite the comprehensive nature of UN clause, the customary international laws remain a significant source of maritime law even today and influencing and complementing this convention, right? There is also another convention that is known as Geneva Convention of 1958 that was replaced by UN clause, but this convention is creating hurdle. Why? How? Prior to UN clause, the Geneva Convention of the Law of the Sea in 1958 addressed similar issues such as territorial sea, high seas, fishing, and conserving of living resources and continental shelf. These conventions are built largely on customary international laws. Now, the issue is Article 311 of UN clause stipulates that UN clause prevails over the Geneva Convention for states that are parties to UN clause, right? But the problem is the countries who are not party to UN clause but the party to Geneva Convention. And now it is creating discrepancy. For example, this leads to complications where non-signatory states to UN clause do not recognize key doctrines such as exclusive economic zone or the area that is beyond 200 nautical mile or beyond exclusive economic zone. For example, United States. Notably, the United States is a signatory to Geneva Convention but has not ratified UN clause, affecting its adherence to the newer maritime legal frameworks established by UN clause. Right? So there is a problem of the definition and scope of resources under the UN clause in the area region or the high sea region, right? And the countries which are abiding by the UN clause or the countries which are abiding by the Geneva Convention and not the UN clause. So UN clause limits the exploration and exploitation in the area to resources defined especially to all solid, liquid and gaseous mineral resources at or beneath the seabed, including polymetallic nodule. This UN clause is prohibiting the exploration in the area or the high seas area, right? There is an ambiguity over whether this definition includes non-mineral resources like fresh water or not. Second is regulatory gap for non-signatories. It remains unclear who regulates the state that are parties to Geneva Convention but not the UN clause. particularly in terms of mining and exploratory activities in the area, right? So who are governing under the UN clause? To all the states who are signatory to UN clause, that is the International Seabed Authority. The International Seabed Authority, established under UN clause, administers and regulates activities in the area, ensuring compliance with the convention's rules and regulation for mineral resources, right? So how this conflict is going to create future water wars as per this article? Predictions suggest that the future conflicts may arise over water and territorial expansion due to fresh water becoming an increasingly scarce and valuable resources. So firstly, there is a scarcity of freshwater resources, and once countries will move beyond their exclusive economic zone, it will create conflicts. Why? Because firstly, who will control over those countries which are not part of UN clause? And secondly, the fresh water resources is not defined or not prohibited under the UN clause, or it's not defined under any type of resources under the UN clause, right? So the area defined by the international law, specifically UN clause, is anticipated to become a significant zone for freshwater exploration and extraction in future. Similar to oil exploration, freshwater wells might be identified, explored, and capped for future use, emphasizing the strategic value of these underwater resources. Current legislation does not specifically addresses the exploration and extraction of non-mineral resources like freshwater in the area, leading to potential legal and regulatory challenges. And lastly, the lack of specific legislation and the integration of multiple laws concerning the sea are likely to make the area a center of controversy regarding resource uses, and rights. Moving forward, there is also global efforts for sustainable development. How? There is a global movement towards achieving sustainable development goals, which include managing and preserving water resources beyond the national jurisdiction. This SDG 6 goes beyond drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene to address the quality and sustainability of water resources, which are critical to the survival of this planet or the people. So there is a need for new legislation, that is a global demand. There is a pressing need to develop amicable, non-controversial legislation that addresses the gaps in current maritime laws, particularly concerning the exploration of fresh water. How it is giving India opportunity? There is a potential leadership role that India can acquire. India is positioned to take a leadership role in creating new international laws or agreements for the sustainable and equitable use of freshwater resources in the area that is high sea, or the area which is beyond the exclusive economic zone, reflecting a shift towards more globally beneficial projects compared to extraterritorial explorations. Next article is Flip Flop Flip. Previously, we discussed about water. Now we are discussing about food or the agricultural produces. In each and every sector of economy, there are three basic questions. First is what to produce. Second is how to produce. And third is how to distribute. And these are the basic questions which govern the whole sector or the whole economy. So if a person or group of people are having control over these three things, they will govern the economic relation. So each and every economic relations are governed by these three questions, right? The sectors other than agriculture, these three questions are governed by the people or the real producers or their relationship with the demand, right? For example, in a manufacturing industry, the prices, what should be produced or what should be manufactured, these are defined by the demand as well as the people who are producing it. How to produce? The people who are the owner of the factory, who are the workers of the factory, they will decide how to produce, and how to distribute will be decided by the manufacturer itself, right? So these are the questions are in the hands of the producer and the demand, in some way, right? But in case of agriculture and specifically in India, these three questions are largely decided by the state or the government. Or for example, MSP. So because of this MSP is given to certain agricultural crops, certain food crops, and that is why the farmers are producing those crops only. So these three questions are largely determined by state in case of agriculture in India, right? And the abrupt changes in these agricultural policies are harming or impacting negatively to the farmers or the people who are associated with agricultural sector, right? Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing one such abrupt decision taken by the state and which is affecting or impacting negatively to the people or the agriculture sector or the farmers or the people who are associated with the agriculture sector. This article is important from the prelims point of view, and if you we can map under GS paper 3, transport and marketing of agricultural produce and issues and related constraints. And UPSC has previously asked multiple questions related with the agriculture sector, including 2020. They have asked about the transport and marketing of agricultural produce in India. So you can expect question related with the agricultural export or the policies associated with agriculture export in future as well. What is the context? This article is discussing that there is a negative impact by the abrupt changes in the government policy on agricultural exports, which is highlighting instability caused by export bans and restrictions as response to food inflation. So there is a food inflation, and in response to that, or as a piecemeal approach by the government, they have changed agricultural export policy, or they have banned the agricultural export. And because of this abrupt change in the policy, it is harming and impacting negatively to the people who are associated with agriculture sector, specifically farmers and agri entrepreneurs who face uncertainty about the corporate entities typically do not endure. So what are the recent examples of export ban? Firstly, wheat export ban in May 2022 because of some food inflation. And secondly, onion export regulation November 2023 and December 2023. Now this shows that the basic questions are not governed by the farmers or the agri entrepreneurs. These questions are governed by the state itself, right? Okay. And that too a very piecemeal approach taken by the government, right? So what are the impact of these policy changes? Because of this abrupt policy changes, the agripreneur or farmers are not able to plan their production. If you are not able to plan your production, you cannot secure your future. And if you cannot secure your future, you cannot secure your business, you cannot increase your income. And that is negatively impacting the farmers' income in India, right? Such frequent policy changes create significant uncertainty, undermining efforts to improve the investment climate and ease of doing business in the agriculture sector. So, legal framework governing the agricultural export bans. First is Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1992. It provides a framework for regulating and developing foreign trade, allowing government to to control exports and imports as needed. Second is Essential Commodities Act. This is also associated with agricultural export bans, and even in the Indian market, people cannot hoard their produces. People cannot store their produces, and that is also negatively impacting their planning. It regulates the supply and ensures availability of essential commodities at fair prices. Third is Export Quality and Control and Inspection Act 1963. It ensures agricultural exports meet required quality standards before shipment. So what is the defense by the government? Government justifies the export restrictions as measures to control food inflation and protect consumers. But critics says that this is hampering people, or this is hampering agriculture sector. Firstly, it is neglecting the producers. The sectors other than agriculture, the real manufacturer or the service provider have the control over all these three questions that we have discussed earlier, right? But in case of agriculture, the producers are being neglected by the government. Second, the economic impact on the farmers is negative. For example, a minor increase in onion price significantly affects the budget of typical household but causes substantial revenue loss for onion growers. Third is it is causing decline in agricultural exports. Due to the imposed export bans and restrictions, India's agricultural exports decreased from 53 billion in the previous fiscal year to 48 or 49 billion dollar in 2023-2024. So what are the recommendation or policy recommendation for the improvement? First, we should have a balanced export import policies, right? The government should come up with some white paper, and they should give people or the farmers a plan for a year or 2 year, right? That should not be a piecemeal approach. That should not be abrupt, and every agricultural policy should be at least taking care of a larger period of time, at least for 2 years, 3 years, in such a fashion, right? Second, there should be, if at all, there should be a control. That control should be a temporary, and that should be a rule-based control. Any necessary control on export should be temporary and implemented through rules and tariffs rather than by using outright bans or quantitative restrictions. Third is creation of buffer stock. It's a government responsibility to create buffer stock in case of any inflation or to fight against the inflation or abrupt inflation. It's not responsibility of the farmers to face the burden of inflation, right? And lastly, there should be stability and predictability in the policies. There is a need for maintaining stable and predictable government policies to protect the interest of the farmers and agri-entrepreneurs. This stability is crucial for fostering a positive environment or positive investment climate and improving the ease of doing business in agricultural sector. Next article is folds and faults. This article is discussing about a new AI tool, that is AlphaFold 3, which is predicting the folding of proteins. What are proteins? Proteins are long chains of amino acid residues and which folds into specific shapes. If this folding is not done in a proper manner, it can create diseases. And this AlphaFold 3 is predicting this folding and predicting the diseases. Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about a new AI-based tool, that is AlphaFold 3, which is predicting the protein folding. This can be helpful in your prelims examination. If we map, we can map under GS paper 3 awareness in the fields of biotechnology. And previously, UPSC has asked multiple questions related to the biotechnology. For example, in 2019, they have asked question with respect to Cas9 protein. So you can expect such type of question in future as well. What is the context? Google subsidiary named as DeepMind, it developed a purpose-built AI tool to predict protein folds. This tool is known as AlphaFold 3. What is AlphaFold 3? AlphaFold 3 is an AI tool designed to predict the 3D structures of protein, DNA, RNA, and their modifications with high accuracy up to 80%, right? It builds on the capabilities of AlphaFold and AlphaFold 2. These are the precursor of AlphaFold 3, offering faster and more precise predictions, significantly advancing in the fields of computational biology. So what is this protein folding problem? See, proteins are long chains of amino acid residues that fold into specific shape, right? So you can see in this picture, this amino acid can be converted into specific shapes. Properly folded proteins functions normally, whereas misfolded ones can lead to debilitating diseases. The protein folding problem involves determining how a protein's amino acid sequence dictates its functional three-dimensional structure. So this protein's amino acid sequencing is getting changed, and that is why this folding is changed. Correct folding is crucial for protein function. Incorrect folding can lead to disease that we have seen. Traditionally, protein structure determination has been a very slow and labor-intensive process, but with the help of artificial intelligence, with the help of AlphaFold 3, this whole AI-based tool has transformed this process from years to days. Okay, what is the breakthrough of AlphaFold 3? AlphaFold 3 predicts the protein structure with almost 80% accuracy. That is a substantial enhancement in the fields of structural prediction. Unlike its predecessors, AlphaFold 3 also models other biomolecules, broadening its utility in biological researches. It reduces the time needed to understand the complex molecular structure from years to mere seconds or days, facilitating rapid advancement in scientific research. So what are the potential benefits of AlphaFold 3? Firstly, accelerated scientific research, right? So it has brought down the whole research process from years to seconds. Second is advancement in drug discovery. If you understand the problem, you can go for the drug discovery. Thirdly, it enhanced our understanding of diseases, specifically those diseases which are based on the mutation of the proteins or mutation of genes. Example, Alzheimer or Parkinson's diseases. Next is global health initiative. It can contribute to global health by accelerating the development of vaccines and treatments for emerging diseases. Next article is Turnouts delays Form 17C. This article is important because of this Form 17C. This Form 17C is under the Conduct of Election Rules 1961. Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about Form 17C and its relation with Election Commission of India. Why? Because a PIL has been filed before Supreme Court of India and it's urging to or seeking to give direction to Election Commission of India to publish this Form 70C data to the public, right? This article is important from prelims point of view, and in GS paper 2 we can map under salient features of Representations of People's Act. And previously UPSC has asked various questions with respect to election or election system in India, so you can expect such type of question in future as well. For example, 2017 UPSC asked about Election Commission of India and Union Ministry of Home Affairs, which decides the election schedule or not. So such type of question you can expect. So what is the context? Context is like a PIL has been filed before the Supreme Court of India seeking direction to the Election Commission of India to disclose the Form 17 data which contains the authenticated record of voter turnout. So what is Form 17C? So under Conduct of Election Rule 1961, there are two important forms which are associated with the number of voters or electors. So let's suppose this is a polling booth. Each and every person as a voter who entered to this polling station are become part of the Form 17A, right? And all the eligible voter who voted are become part of Form 17C. So what is Form 17A? It is a register of voters used by polling official to record the details of each voter who enters the polling booth and signs the register. This form essentially tracks the attendance of voters at polling station during an election. But 17C is the actual voters recorded or the account of votes recorded. It's an account of votes recorded issued to the polling agents of the candidate at close of polling. So in the evening, just before the closing of the polling, these data, 17C data, is giving to the or issued to the polling agents of each and every candidates or the candidates agents, right? This form contains several key pieces of information including identification number of EVMs, total number of electors assigned, total number of voters recorded in Form 17A, the number of voters who are opted not to vote, the number of voters who were not permitted to vote. So effectively the effective votes are being covered under the 17C of Form 17C, right? Part 2 of Form 17C includes the result of counting which are entered on the day of counting. The data in Form 17C are final and crucial for any election petition challenging in the election result, and that is the biggest uh, significance of Form 17C. But there is a demand for public access to form this 17C data. Although this 17C data is giving to the agents of each and every candidates, though there is a demand for public access. Why? The demand to make Form 17C data publicly available arises from a desire for full transparency in the electoral processes. Although Form 17C is made available to candidates' agent, the logistical challenges of coordinating and gathering data from numerous polling stations across the constituency can be overwhelming, particularly for candidates with very limited resources. Making Form 17C data public would allow the broader scrutiny and verification of the recorded votes against the votes counted by EVM on the counting day. Furthermore, while the Election Commission of India states that it's not legally bound to publish voter turnout data at the aggregate level, activists argue that public access to Form 17C would enhance trust and accountability in the electoral process. Last article for today's discussion is Government Notifies Act for Armed Forces Control. So in case of, in India, in case of armed forces or military forces, there are three acts or three wings of the military. One is Army, second is Air Force, third is Navy. And these forces are governed by their respective act. For example, 1950 Army Act, 1950 Air Force Act, and 1957 Navy Act, right? And only an officer of the same service holds disciplinary power over the person governed by the respective act. So, for example, officer of army officer can hold a disciplinary or can take disciplinary action against a person which is governed by the Army Act 1950. There is no cross-service disciplinary action allowed in India so far, allowed so far, right? But what was the problem? Problem was, like, for example, Joint Service Command or any inter-service organization, the commander-in-chief did not hold power or disciplinary power against the person who comes from another wing of this military forces or armed forces. To take disciplinary action, that person has to go to their unit itself, and this creates a huge lag in terms of disciplinary action or the decisions taken by the commander-in-chief, right? And that is why government came up with one act that is known as Inter-Services Organization Act 2024. This article is discussing about this Inter-Services Organization Act, which is important aspect of governance, transparency and accountability, and various security forces and agencies and their mandate comes under this aspect. Previously, UPSC has asked questions with respect to the functioning of our armed forces. For example, in 2015, they asked about AFSPA. So you can expect such type of act-related questions in future as well. What is the context? The Government of India has issued Gazette notification for the enforcement of Inter-Service Organization Command, Control and Discipline Act. This is the full name of this act, effective from May 10, 2024. It gives commanders more control over the military personnel for better discipline. This rule is a part of the plan to recognize the military and make it work together more smoothly. It's a Tri-Services Act. It makes this Tri-Services concept more smooth. It aims to improve how different branches of the military cooperate between each other or with each other. So let's understand about something more about this ISO Act, this Command, Control and Discipline Act. So government has notified this act through a gadget notification, and this gadget notification is an official public announcement for the or the publication made by the government in a gadget, which is a periodic publication containing the government notices, laws, regulations and other official announcements. Gadget notifications serve as a formal means of communicating important information to the public, and through which they have communicated this act as well. As far as this act is concerned, this act was passed by both houses of parliament in 2023, and president gave the assent on 2023 itself. This ISO are specialized bodies within the military that facilitate cooperation and coordination among the different branches of the armed forces. These organizations typically oversee the joint operation, intelligence sharing, logistic training and other functions that require collaboration between multiple military services such as Army, Navy and Air Force, which were earlier governed by different acts. Now also they are governed by different acts, but for the joint ventures or joint operation or any joint military exercise or any joint service command, this act will prevail all the previous act, right? This inter-services organization includes soldiers from Army, Air Force and Navy like Joint Training Institute, National Defense Academy, National Defense College, Defense Services Staff Colleges and Andaman and Nicobar Command. So what is the rationale behind this law? At present, armed forces personnel are governed by the provisions of three separate laws, that is Air Force Act 1950, Army Act 1950 and the Navy Act 1957. Only an officer of the same service hold the disciplinary power over the person governed by the respective act. As far as inter-service organizations are concerned, this directly impacts command, control and discipline, because it delays the process specifically with respect to the disciplinary action. Since the commander-in-chief of a joint commission or joint services command and the officers in command of the any inter-services organization are not empowered with disciplinary powers, any person accused of an offense has to be sent back to the parent service unit for any disciplinary or administrative action. And this existing framework is time consuming and involves financial cost to move to the personnel. This legislation, passed legislation, it's not proposed legislation, it's passed legislation, aims to address these impediments to ensure discipline is maintained. So what are the key provisions of the act? Empowerment of commander-in-chief and officers in command in ISOs to exercise power or control over the service personnel. Second is, these people, the commander-in-chief or officer in command, will be responsible for overseeing the directing the operations of the inter-services organizations, and it ensures the maintenance of unique service conditions of individual service member across the services. Moving forward, the provisions for expeditious disposal of cases is also included in this act, and facilitation of greater integration and jointness among the armed forces personnel is also a provision in this act. So what is the purpose and impact? This act aims to bolster effective command, control and efficient functioning of the ISOs, and it is viewed as the crucial step towards greater integration and jointness among the armed forces personnel. So far we have discussed all the important articles. Let's do some practice questions. First question is, what is AlphaFold 3 that is often mentioned in the news? A quantum computing processor developed by IBM? No. An AI-based software developed by DeepMind that predicts the three-dimensional structure of proteins with a high accuracy? That seems correct. A new blockchain technology? No. A supercomputer designed by NVIDIA? No. So answer will be B part. Second question, what is the primary objective of establishing inter-services organizations within a nation's military? Enhancing cooperation with foreign military alliances? No. Streamlining communication between different branches of the armed forces? That is correct. So B part will be the correct answer. Third question is, with reference to Form 17C as per the Conduct of Election Rule 1961, consider the following statements. Form 17C is an account of the votes recorded and is issued at the close of polling. That is correct. The Election Commission of India is legally bound to publish the data from Form 17C. That is not correct. It's not legally bound to publish. So A part will be the correct answer. With reference to the Essential Commodities Act of 1955, consider the following statement. Both central and state governments have no, only central government has the power to amend the schedule containing the list of essential commodities. So this statement is incorrect. A commodity can be declared as an essential for a period not exceeding 6 months. No, it is up to 6 months, but it can be extendable. So this is also incorrect. Answer will be D part. Last question is, consider the following statements. Consider the following powers of the Election Commission of India. ECI has advisory jurisdiction in the matters of post-election disqualification of sitting members of parliament and state legislature. That is correct. The ultimate power rests with the Supreme Court. ECI has the power to disqualify a candidate who has failed to lodge an account of election expenses within the time. That is correct. Once the polls are completed and results declared, the ECI cannot review any result of its own. That is also correct. So all three will be the correct answer. C part will be the correct answer. Now mains practice question. If the wars of this century were fought over oil, the wars of the next century will be fought over water unless we change our approach to managing this precious and vital resource. Discuss. Also, so this century should not be there. 20th century, and this should be the 21st century, right? Also suggest an approach to use sustainably and preserve water resources. So in this introduction, we have to show the escalating global crisis surrounding over the water scarcity and its potential for conflict that it brings, right? And the body part, we have to discuss the statement both in support and the comment on the implication by giving historical context, current water crisis, potential for conflict, and comparative analysis with other like oil crisis, right? Then explain the approaches. For example, we have to improve the water management, including integrated water management, demand management. We need to incorporate technological innovations such as water cycling, usage and water use efficiency, legal and institutional reforms that should include the international legal reforms as well, that to cover the fresh water sources under the marine or saline water, right? That includes transboundary water management, education awareness and climate change mitigation, etc. And finally, in conclusion, by adopting these multifaceted approaches, the global community can avert the dire predictions of water wars and ensure that water management practices contribute to the long-term peace and sustainability. Through which we are concluding our discussion. If you like our initiative, like, share and subscribe. Thank you.